So people often ask me how to resolve conflicts without violence. You know, we've all heard the phrase, violence is not the answer. And I just want to say, that is really true. So despite this aphorism, which is like one of my special words, but really aphorism means despite this short, wise phrase, what we often see is often the opposite. So, from the elementary school playground to the rise of violent crime across the country to the war in Ukraine, and yeah, even on the Oscar stage, all we seem to see is violence as a way to resolve conflict. But there is another way, a better one that resolves conflicts to better results with lower costs and without the trauma, destruction, and heartache that violence brings. So today I'm going to share with you 4 steps to ensure that you are never trending on Twitter after losing your and pulling a Will Smith. So number 1, believe and commit to the notion that nonviolent conflict resolution is possible. Okay, so I know it might be Pollyannish, and just in case you don't know what Pollyannish is, it means it might be naive to believe that nonviolent conflict resolution is possible. What I want to say is that the first important step is actually coming to your own belief that this can be done. So why do I say that? So there is a lot of research done on the importance of belief and how it connects to action. So let's take a few examples. Some of you watching this maybe go to church or mosque or synagogue every week. And if I asked you why, I suspect it would be because you'd say, I have some belief in this faith or this higher power. Others of you maybe choose to be vegetarian or vegan. And if I asked you why, you'd probably say, because I believe that it's healthier, or I believe it's cruel to kill and eat animals. Others of you maybe decide to buy an electric car or to bike to work instead of buying a really big truck. And if I ask you why, you'd say, well, I believe that human beings contribute to climate change and doing these things helps reduce climate change. What is my point here? My point here is we don't take any action in an intentional way unless we believe there's some reason for doing so. Once we have belief, then we commit to action. First step in committing to nonviolent conflict practices is believing that it's possible and believing it makes a difference in the world. And so if I think about the colleagues with whom I work, whom I most admire, they're people who have made a professional long-term commitment to teach and practice skills that are really hard to do because they see that difference in the world. Number 1 step is it has to be more than an aphorism. It has to be more than a short saying. It has to be more than a Pollyannish, pie-in-the-sky notion. When you believe in something, then you take the steps to actually enact it. So let's move on to the second of these important steps, which is once you have the belief, you need to engage in building skills of empathy and perspective taking. So let me say a little bit about what I mean by empathy, because empathy is different from sympathy, and it's different from agreeing with what someone is doing, or even actually feeling their pain. Empathy is the process of understanding what someone might be feeling and reflecting that back to them. So it's about understanding their perspective, understanding their worldview. And one of the really critical skill sets for being good at nonviolent conflict resolution is the ability to take the perspective of people with whom we disagree. And that becomes particularly hard in situations when what we think they're doing is crazy or nonsensical or wrong or immoral or wrong-headed in some way. But if we can build that perspective taking, many times, if we really understand what the world looks like from their perspective, we don't come away saying, oh, that's brilliant, or oh, that's the best strategy. But what we can often say is, from their perspective, I can see how they see the world that way. And that step is really important because once we do that, we are less likely to dehumanize. We are less likely to contribute to polarization. I have the very great honor and privilege of doing a lot of work with an organization called Seeds of Peace. So Seeds of Peace works in many places around the world, but has traditionally worked in places where there's intractable violent conflict. One of the regions in which the organization has its biggest presence is in Israel-Palestine. And they work with young emerging leaders, Israelis and Palestinians, bringing them together, not for the purpose of shifting their views, but for the purpose of giving them skills of empathy and perspective taking. And what's interesting, and I've had the real honor of working in dialogues with Israeli and Palestinian young people, is at the end of these dialogues, it is rarely the case that an Israeli has suddenly adopted the Palestinian viewpoint, or that the Palestinian has suddenly adopted the Israeli's viewpoint. But it is very frequently the case that people who came in thinking of the other as an arch enemy, thinking of the other as somebody who might actually want to contribute to the annihilation of them, instead speak of the other as a full-fledged, three-dimensional human being with needs, concerns, hopes, and dreams that are similar to their own. And once we can do that with the other side, it reduces the likelihood that we are going to use violence as a way of resolving conflict. Third important skill, practice active listening skills. So if you've been listening in my channel almost all the time, I talk about listening, listening, listening. And that's because active listening is so much a central skill in nonviolent conflict resolution, in effective negotiation, in succeeding in difficult conversations. So the component pieces of active listening skills is developing an internal curiosity about what does the world look like from the other person. So active listening always starts from a place of generous inquiry, generous listening. It also means learning to paraphrase in an accurate way what you hear the other person communicating to you. That does a number of things, right? First, it helps us understand them better. Second, it helps us understand what it is we're missing. But third, that paraphrasing back makes them feel heard, makes them feel seen, and takes them from, again, this invisible, unacknowledged person or entity into the world of seen, acknowledged, heard. And one of the things that we know is we are much more prone to lash out in a violent way when we feel unseen, unacknowledged, not heard, because we feel that violence is the only way to get attention. Number 4 is reaching out for assistance when needed. Even those of us who are most trained, most skillful, most self-aware with respect to conflict, at times, because we're human beings, we have an empathy gap, or there's a side of us that just feels like I would rather lash out against them than work with them. But one of the great things about being human beings is that we live in communities and families, and there's institutions and people out there who can help. And so my experience as a mediator and my experience as a conflict resolver is that the times that have been most gratifying for me have been times when somebody who is actually quite conflict competent has reached out because they appreciate the limits of their ability to handle a situation well. And at times, having the presence of a mediator, having the presence of a facilitator can make a really big difference. Also, there are times when it really isn't a good idea to bring the parties into a room. There's too much anger, there's too much bad feeling, we can't create a sense of security. But that's actually when mediators can be helpful, because sometimes a mediator or a facilitator can actually do shuttle diplomacy, working back and forth with parties in separate physical space. Even if they can't help bring about a reconciliation or restore the relationship, they can at least work out a détente. Okay, there's another word for you. détente. So détente basically is a status of agreement where parties are able to kind of move forward even if the relationship isn't great. So they agree to certain terms of moving forward with each other in nonviolence under certain circumstances. And so having the courage in those situations when you feel like I'm out of control, the situation is out of control, this is unsafe, to look to mediators, third-party guarantors, or facilitators can make a lot of sense. So, in review, if you want to be somebody who makes a difference in your world by advancing notions of nonviolent conflict resolution, follow these 4 steps. First, believe it's possible. Belief leads to action. Then commit to learning the skills and practices that will fulfill your belief. Second, look to build skills of empathy and perspective taking. We don't have to agree with them. We don't even have to have sympathy for them. But the more we can see what the world looks like from their perspective, the more likely we'll see them as human beings and will avoid dehumanization and demonization that are the seeds of violent conflict. Third, make a real commitment to learn and practice active listening skills. Right? We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And lastly, when you're overwhelmed, when you feel like the situation is beyond your ability to deal with it, reach out for help. There are all sorts of professionals who have training and can help as a third party. So if you want to keep learning here on how to advance nonviolent conflict resolution, stay tuned for this next video, which is how to improve your negotiation skills. And of course, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Also, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you want to get some training on these skills, please reach out to me at the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. I'm Bob Bordone. Thanks for watching, and let's keep negotiating together. Here's the next video. There's some really good vocabulary words there too.